Coding Challenge Review Expert, 18th of February. What we got today here? Oh, first one, in your face. Get consecutive chains. It's one of the most complex questions, right, on the expert training. It's a classic questions about data manipulation, right? So 80% on this problem is about thinking on an appropriate data structure. I'm going to present you my proposal. There are many alternatives. And then obviously we'll compare it against yours. So, I mean, the first part is pretty simple. So function get consecutive chains. We receive a number, right? So out of that number, so for example, if we got 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, if we got something like that, what we want back is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, right? So that's the what we eventually want to return. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something like that. I'm going to create sub-arrays. Why? Because again, JavaScript is very powerful handling arrays, right? So if you got an array, then you can obviously transform that into a string, into a number, reverse it, short it, whatever, right? Whatever. Cool, so that's the eventual goal. Again, that question is quite complicated, but if you follow the right steps, you will see how simple it is. So the first thing, the number is a number, right? So let me transform it to a string. Why? Because once it's a string, I can split it, yeah, to have an array of individual numbers as strings. And once I split it, I'm going to use map number because I want to transform them again into numbers. In this particular case, it's important to make sure that we are dealing with numbers because we need to check whether numbers are consecutive, right? So we need basic math operations. So please make sure you transform them into numbers. And then I'm going to use reduce, and that will be the tough part of the exercise. But I'm going to leave it there for now. And I'm going to the bottom. Hopefully after reduce, I'll get something like that. Right, this structure. So based on that structure, I can do map. So then for each chain of consecutive numbers, the chain will be an array of 1, 2, 3, right? So I will do chain dot join to have a string, right? So essentially I'm transforming 1, 2, 3 into 1, 2, 3, yeah? And because we really want a number, we can always, of course, transform it into a number, right? You see how am I narrowing the problem. So hopefully that will return 1, 2, 3, as a number, 56, and then 89, something like that. So now reduce, that's the complex part. That's the complex part. So here, essentially, we have a list of chains. That will be the accumulator. I'm going to initialize it already as an empty array, right? Because eventually we want to have a master array, and then each individual number. The thing is, depending on whether the numbers are consecutive or not, I will either want to add the given number to the current chain, or I would like to create a new chain of consecutive numbers. In that respect, I'm going to create two functions, one to add a number to the existing chain and one to add the number to a new chain. So add to existing chain. Chain will be, so we'll see the array of chains, assuming that it already exists. We'll see what to do here. And then the very first time, add to newer chain, right? So these are the two functions I want to create. Add to existing chain means if I got something like that, if I got that, 1, 2, and I got number 3, right? So I need the number as well. I will essentially want to get 1, 2, 3. Yeah? So how do we do that? Well, we can simply do change. How do we know what's the last chain on the list? How do we get the last element in an array? Correct, that's correct. Change.length -1, that will point to the last sub-array, right? Could be here, 8, 9, 5, 6, whatever we are, right? But it will point to the last element of the array. So to that chain, I want to push the number. So in that particular case, if what we go so far is an array, and that array has one chain of 1, 2, 3, sorry, and I got number 4, right? Change.length is what? So the highlighted text is the variable change. What's the value of change.length? 1. That's correct. That is 1. Look, change the master array. How many elements the master array has? 1. That's the only element, right? So now, what's the size of change.length? Wrong. 2, of course. 1 and 2. What's now the size of change.length? Correct. What's now the size of change.length? 5, yeah? So essentially what we do here is refer to the last element of the change, the list of change, which will be that element. What type of data the last element of the array is? What? Wrong. An array, of course. So we have an array of arrays. Each sub-array will be built based on the consecutive numbers. So in other words, we have that, right? What's the size of change.length? 2, correct. Correct. Right? So, add to existing chain, that means that we've already proved the numbers are consecutive. We'll do that in a minute. But for now, these are like 2 utility functions to, simplify our logic or to encapsulate the complexity into a single function. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the last element on the array, and then I'll push a new number here, 4, 5, 6, whatever, right? Because I know that the numbers are consecutive. But what happens if they are not consecutive? If they are not consecutive, essentially, what I want to do is that. I want to add a new subarray, because once I have the new subarray, they can add 8, 9. Yeah? So add to new chain, that means change dot push what? I want to initialize the new subarray. So what do I have to push here? A what? No, wrong. An empty array, correct. I'm initializing a new sequence of consecutive numbers. And once I have that, I can either do that, right? Okay, I got the new, so I'm changing the pointer, because now we have a new element. We can do that again, right? We can say, okay, point to the last element of the array, which is that element that we just added, and then push the new number, right? So we are adding 8, for example, here.
And we're putting just one line with number in the square bracket.
Say it again?
We're just having one line for adding new to chain, with the push just having number in the square
I'm not following you, Jeff.
Okay, so this number,
Yeah.
put it in that square bracket.
Okay. Here.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. Yep. I mean, yeah, let's do that. But before doing that, let me show you an alternative. Because I think we'll agree that we are doing the same thing twice. So for readability purposes, we can do that, right? Look. So how do we add to a new chain? First of all, create a chain and then add it to the existing. The existing is the last one. Yeah? Or we can do as Jeff proposed, put the number here, yeah? Both should be equally valid. Any question? Right, so that was, the complexity was pretty much there because now, obviously we need to check if numbers are consecutive or not, right? So if something, do something, else, do something else. And finally, remember to return the list of change, right, for the next iteration. So if are consecutive, how do we know if they are consecutive? So if they're consecutive, we'll add to the existing chain. If not, we'll add them to a new chain. So now, all the complexities here. We need to be able to write the condition. How do we know two numbers are consecutive, right? The problem is getting simpler. So to do that, I propose you something. Let's compare a given number against the previous one, right? How do we get the previous number of an array? So I want to see if number equal previous plus 1. What's previous? How do we do that? Array in, what's array and what's index? That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah? So if a number, for example, 2, is the same as the previous one, 1 plus 1, then they're consecutive. Is 2 equal 1 plus 1? Yeah. Yeah, they should, right? Correct. In that case, then add them to the existing array. Do you think that will work, or is there anything missing? What happens if index is 0? First case. What happened? It won't work, right? Yeah. If index, index is 0, we are pointing to array of 0 minus 1, array minus 1, which doesn't make sense at all, right? So I propose you something. Here we can do if index and, yeah? Why? Because if index is 1, 2, 3, 4, will it be evaluated as truthy or falsy? Truthy. But what happens if index is 0? Is 0 truthy or falsy? Is falsy, correct. So on the very first number, the very first one, 1, then 3, then 1, right? On the very first number on each scenario, that will be falsy, right? Because falsy and whatever, it returns false, yeah? So on the very first number, it will be added to a new chain, which is what we want, right? So in other words, the very first thing we want to do is we want to do that. 1. Then we'll see if we put 2 here or if we need to put 3 there. We'll see. But the very first number, we need to initialize the very first subchain, right? Like that. And I think that should be pretty much it. Shall we try? Right. Chain is not defined. Line number 10. Oh, chains, right? Will work faster probably. Let's try again. Chains is not defined. So 22. What? Oh, sorry. Yes, correct. 14. No, that's correct. That's correct because there's a map. So that's each individual chain. So that's correct, right? Right. Now it doesn't work. You didn't return anything. That means... Say it again? I cannot. Line 2, yes. Maybe, right? It will work faster probably with the return statement. Yeah, and then it works, right? Again, there are multiple ways to solve the problem. You may want, instead of creating an array of arrays, you can create an array of strings. Maybe some of you have done that, something like that. Yeah? So then instead of pushing, you just concatenate at the end. I don't know, things like that, right? Let me see what you did here. Question number 1, get consecutive chains. So Ben, same thing, right? Number to string, split, reduce, you see? So it says, if I don't have any number, any index, sorry, that means it's 0, add to a new subchain, right? Otherwise, check if numbers are consecutive. If they are consecutive, add it to the existing chain. Otherwise, add them to a new subchain again. It's pretty much the same thing, just 2 subtle differences. First of all, the logic is a bit more complicated, as you can see, right? Because he needs if else, right? He has to nest 2 conditionals. Also, he needs to compare to transform to number all the time, which is less efficient, right? Because what we did is to transform everything into number. That's it. Then we don't care because we know we're dealing with numbers all the time, right? Cool. So yeah, this is Ben, and what else? And then Mo. Interestingly, Mo is something radically different. Short code. Let's have a look. So Mo, first of all, ignoring the indentation issues. So he has an array of numbers, and then what he does is, okay, iterate over the array of numbers, and then taking the next one as a reference. So then tell me how many consecutive numbers do I have. So while I have a consecutive number, keep increasing the counter. So he's evaluating the range. How many numbers are in the same range, in the same chain, right? And at the end, he's essentially pushing, right, a slice with all the consecutive numbers, right? He transforms them into a string, and then you remember what that plus meant? Correct. Correct. So that was to transform strings into numbers, yeah? I kind of like it. I think it's an interesting approach. The only concern is that may be less performant because we are nesting loops, you see? But in reality, I think it's pretty smooth, to be honest, because he's not like looping again from the beginning. So he starts from the beginning, and then he always takes the nested loop from the current position until there is a consecutive number. So I found it quite interesting, to be honest. I'll tell you something, this is not my style, clearly not, but I appreciate this kind of solution, right? Because that gives me an idea about how to solve problems following a different pattern. I think that's the way you progress as a developer. understanding different strategies and trying to sometimes follow them, right? So for example, if I have to do the same problem again, I will try to do the same thing as Mo did, because to me that will be more challenging, because I'm not used to that kind of syntax, right? I think that's pretty much it, guys, regarding the first question. So, anything else? No? That was arguably the most complicated question on the expert. So, question number 2. So we got an object with what? Numbers, strings, and functions, right? And we want to add them all. So that's a bit confusing, right? You need to spend maybe a couple of minutes trying to understand how can this return 21. That returns 21 because we do 2 plus 5, 7, right? So then we're expected to pass 7 as the argument of the function. 7 multiplied by 2 is 14. So then we need to do 2 plus 7 plus 14. Oh, which is 21. It's a bit tricky, right? Cool. Not a big fan of this question, but hey, it's what it is, right? So, return object.values. We don't care about the keys, right? We don't care if the key is A, B, D, F. We don't care. Simply, let's do object.values of object, and that will give us an array with the values, right? So then I'm going to use reduce. I'm going to add the values. So with reduce, I will have the total and then the value. What's the first value of the accumulator? If we want to add multiple values, what's the first one? If you have a function called sum, 0, thank you, correct. So, now the problem is value can be a number. Number is the easiest example, right? If it's a number, just add it. So let's use type of, return type of, you remember type of?
No, I don't remember.
If you don't remember type of, there's a very good video on YouTube. If typos, it's actually the second most popular video we recorded last week after Jeff's presentation. Yeah, it's good. Cool. Type of value equal what? Number, numbers. I sell number, correct. If it's a number, easy, right? If it's a number, just do total, return total plus number, plus value, sorry. But then, otherwise, let's think about strings. If it's a string, how do you check if a variable is a type of string? Correct. If it's a string, total plus what? Correct. Parse int value. Can we use number here?
No, because there is a pixel there.
That's correct. That's correct. So with parse int, yeah, I hope you remember that, because in a couple of weeks' time, in your first job interview, probably Daniel got that question this morning. We'll ask him afterwards, right? No excuses. Cool. And then, finally, else. We can assume that if it's not a number, if it's not a string, it's a function. The default case. You can use switch here as well. It may work really well, to be honest. But hey, let's just stick to the ternary approach. That's the complicated point. How do we invoke value? What do we do here? We can do total plus what? Any argument?
Yeah.
What? Needs to be total. Yeah, of course. Why? Again, 2 plus 5, 7. Then we pass the subtotal here, n is 7, right? 7 multiplied by 2, 14, plus whatever the total was 7, 14, plus 7, 21. Yeah? So you can see it's actually not that complex in terms of how much code you need to write. It obviously works, right? Yeah. Let me check what you did. I'm going to skip some of you. I'll first focus, actually, I'll tell you something. No, sorry, no, excuse me. I was thinking of the next question. So Ben, same thing, right? He uses for each equally valid, but that's the same thing, right? If it's a string, parsing, if it's a number, value, and if it's a function, then just invoke it, right? Cool. And more, pretty much the same thing. Pretty simple, right? Any question? You know why Mo left? Because he's not going to like what I'm going to say on the next question. So, not Mo, excuse me, Itamar. Oh. Right, he probably, no, actually, I have a message for Mo, Itamar, and Natasha, right? We'll see that in a minute. He probably knows what I'm going to say next. Question number 3. Here, everything is wrong. Well, not everything is wrong. So first of all, I did something wrong, and some of you did something wrong as well. So what I did wrong? What I did wrong here is, I was expecting everybody here to use lexical this, and actually I'll solve it using lexical this. That was the main purpose. However, I didn't notice at the time I wrote the function that there was a simpler way to do that without using lexical this. So it's not your fault not using lexical this. It's my fault to give you the opportunity to solve it in a different way. Yeah? So that question will require some rethinking. So I'll do that in the proper way, not in the proper, in the way I was expecting, and the way I failed to force you to do that, and then I'll see how you did it, right? So, say hello. We got 2 arguments, right? First of all, we got a person with some details, writer, and then we got something, we got a second argument, writer methods. Right. Methods. So, what we were expecting here is we should invoke getWriterName, yeah? And then we should make sure that lexical this refers to the writer object. Do you remember in JavaScript how to change the lexical this? What? No, but we cannot, okay, fair enough. We could use an arrow function here, but we can't, right? We cannot change that code. The code is what it is. Because it's a classic function, we can override lexical this. How? Yeah? Do you remember last week we did a couple of examples, right? User 1, user 2. Call. That's correct, Poppy. Call. Or apply. You remember? So let's do that in the correct way. And I encourage you, if you do it again, to do it in the correct way, even though there is a trick to, but yes, let's try to make it correctly. So essentially, let me create a variable called writerName, and whatever it is, eventually we want to return welcome to MotoGP, comma. Does anyone know what MotoGP means, by the way? Yeah, that's a motorcycle company. You know Valentino Rossi? Yeah, you know Valentino Rossi? I'm sure you heard about him, right? He turned 40 years old last week. 46 is the number of his bike. Correct. Il Dottore. We got 2 Italians in the first bootcamp by the first time. So welcome to MojoTP and then rider name. So now the question is, how do we get the rider name? Well, what some of you have done, which again, is not your fault, to be honest. It's not your fault. Who's what? Who's the guilty? We'll see in a minute. Not guilty. Listen. To me, there are two types of faults you've done here. One is completely acceptable because you don't have to know what is on my mind, right? So I completely understand that, and again, it's not your fault. But the other one, it is your fault, not you personally. But I will see in a minute why, who and why, and how I noticed that was not acceptable. But I'll go there in a minute. Cool. So rider name. So the easy solution, because you guys want the first name, right? Because you guys want the first name, Fabio, we can do split. You know, we can easily get the name of the rider, right? We can do rider dot split empty string 0, right? And that's it. Yeah. That's probably beginner. Oh, rider. Sorry, it's an object, right? Rider dot rider name. Yeah, whatever. Oh. Ah, the exclamation mark. I lost some points here. Yeah, that was easy, but that wasn't the plan, right? The idea was to do something a bit different. But anyway, that works, right? But I would like to show you, because you're here to learn, not to get points, how to what I wanted to do. So what I wanted to do, I didn't want to do that, because that was supposed to be kind of private. We shouldn't get access to the details of the rider. That's why we have a function here that will do that for us. So essentially, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do methods dot, how's the name of the method? Get rider name dot call, and then what? Rider, correct. Whatever we pass here will become the new lexical this. So if we pass the rider here, this dot rider name will be equal to that. Yeah? So that's the elegant way to get the name. So based on that, we still need to do the dot split thingy, right? To get the first name. Like that, I believe. Yeah? So that's the first thing. Oh, you didn't do anything. Cannot read property call of undefined. Methods to get rider name. Get rider. Yeah, maybe. So if we try again, now it works. It's the same solution, but here we prove we understand how to change the lexical this. In the future, that example will be refactored to make sure that you do that as I expect, right? As we expect. That's why I'm sure you've all noticed, but now we got as part of the new platform React Playground. I'm sure you've seen that already. A bit off topic. So I'm sure you've seen the React training, right? So one of the reasons why we'll be doing React training is not because of React itself, right? So you know that with React, you can test your components and all these things. Actually, remember there are 2 points on the board challenge for whoever solves the test. Yeah. But apart from that, the reason why I'm referring to that is because of this. So this is that kind of pattern. This is using Mocha and Jest and Enzyme. These are some very powerful testing libraries in JavaScript. So we can do much complex assertions. We can play with promises. We can check a number has been called several times with n arguments, all these things, right? That's why in the future, our tests will become more precise But A, for the time being, they're a bit rudimentary. Function, return something, that's it, right? Cool, so. What was the question? I'll check that in a minute. First of all, so the only acceptable solution here is Poppy's one. It's the only acceptable solution because even though she didn't do what in my mind was expected, at least she tried her best to prepare something, right? It's pretty horrible, to be honest, indentation, everything is wrong, but at least it's acceptable, yeah? However, there's something interesting. I check Itamar, and that looked really weird. Looked really weird. Really, really weird, right? What was that? What was that, right? And then I said, I don't know. I don't really know what his, okay, I mean, I can understand, but it doesn't feel his style, right? I check Natasha, and she did literally the same thing. And I check Mo, surprise, same thing. In other words, they copied the solution. Never do that. I'll show you from where in a second. Because I found where they copied from, right? That's the type of thing you should never do. I prefer you to fail. I prefer you not to know how to solve something than giving the impression that you know something. Because you don't know, right? If this is a real company, Mo, are you there? Can you confirm you copied that from a coding challenge on the 15th of January? Correct. Correct. So if we go back to history, on the 15th of January, Osh, who is not even a JavaScript developer, he's a really good developer, but he's not a JavaScript developer, right? He's constantly attending coding challenges and stuff. I think last one he finished third last Wednesday, so he's getting really good, right? But this type of code is the typical code from someone who knows how to code but doesn't know how to code with JavaScript yet. Yeah. So why I notice this is wrong? Why square bracket notation here? This doesn't make any sense. Square bracket notation makes sense when you want to dynamically refer to a given variable or you know, but in that case, that's a static. So why don't you rider info dot get rider name? Yeah, that looks weird. That's why I noticed. Apart from that, Mo and Natasha, at least they rename some variables to make it feel genuine, right? But Itamar didn't care at all. So Itamar, as the second argument, what's that? Does anyone know what that means? Collabel, yeah, I'll show you. He put collabel just because Osh put collabel. So probably Itamar didn't even care what that means, right? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, that word doesn't exist. Yeah? Don't do that. That's the worst thing you can do, right? Well, there is just one thing worse than copying code from others. It's just not assuming that you did it, right? At least Mo was honest, right? So don't do that. If you don't know how to do it, skip it or try, but don't copy it. So that's pretty much it in regards to that question, right? Itamar, because you missed that part. Don't copy code from the internet, please.
All right.
Yeah? Because you copied here, right?
All right.
Yeah? What collabel means?
Say that again?
What that means?
All right, yeah, you're right.
Cool. Again, this is not a proper competition. I don't want you to get the highest score possible. I want you to understand what you're doing, right? Same message for Natasha.
Hey, both of them.
Cool. So question number 4, I will skip it because we already covered that. And same applies to question number 5. We covered these questions already. So I'm not going to do them now. Based on that, we pretty much completed the challenge. So is there any question? No? Not at the moment? Cool. Any question more, Richard? No? So did anyone got the question? Can you say it again, Mo? You want my opinion on your first question? Which one? 5th. Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure, Mo, no problem at all. So, yeah, classic, right? To me, I just have, so that looks quite elegant. Yeah. I don't know what to say. No, it's good. I mean, it's good. It's good, right? So this is a typical question where you need to transform from strings to numbers and then back to strings, right? So generally speaking, so that's the classic thing, right? Number and then to string. But Mo, he used the shorthands, right? Look at the way he transforms from string to number with plus. Look how he transforms from number to string, plus empty string. So even though that's shorter syntax, I personally, and you may disagree, of course, on that, I slightly prefer that one because it's a bit more explicit. I found that a bit weird. Accumulator plus plus minus plus, I don't know. Even though it does a trick, I found it a bit weird. But anyway, just personal suggestion. Anything else? No? Cool. That was it for today's. Thank you very much, guys.